All right, everyone, welcome back. While people are trickling in, I want to introduce you to our next speaker. So the line between retail and food service is blurring, with a lot of supermarkets expanding into sort of like virtual mini takeout restaurants, and a great number even have in-house cafes. And so we really wanted to include this trend in our conference here. And we knew just the expert to talk to you about the whole grain opportunities in Grocerants, Steve Petusevsky. He has previously been the corporate chef for Whole Foods Market and has worked as a consultant to many of the largest grocery chains. And Steve is also a culinary advisor for the Whole Grains Council and the Mediterranean Foods Alliance. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Kelly. Are we on here, or can you hear me? Up? Good. Okay, great. Kelly was concerned. She was up last night practicing the entire evening my last name because she was afraid she was going to botch it up, but like everybody does. But thank you very much. So thank you very much for being here. I'm going to kind of wait a second to get you all back in here. But I first want to thank Kelly and Sarah and Cynthia for inviting me and asking me to come because I've been a friend and traveling partner of Oldways for over 25 years. And the reason I say that is because it was first visiting and being immersed in the culinary culture, the true culinary culture of a lot of the Mediterranean and North African countries that kind of changed the direction of my career, because being immersed in the actual culture and seeing how cooks have been doing things for thousands of years kind of made me realize that if I could learn what I learned in these countries and actually work in the kitchens of the home cooks and figure out a way to operationalize what they were doing in large-scale operations like Whole Foods Market and many others, I would really have something special going on here. And that's kind of, what has transpired over the course of the last 20 years. I've been able to somehow take what I learned in these other cultures, which have been using grains and legumes and plant-forward cuisine for many, many years, and put them into many operations here in this country. And it's really, although I think retail is in my DNA, and what I consider is, I open restaurants and supermarkets. I don't look at them, frankly, and to be very transparent with you, I hate the word grocerant. And it's really the only word that marketing and branding people could come up with, because rest of groceries doesn't sound good, and they've tried a million other terminologies. But what I do, so I'm just going to kind of lay it out there, and then so we can go through this and tell you how grains are an integral part of what I do. I was the corporate chef of Whole Foods Market for 12 or 13 years. I'm also a journalist, and in 2003, after I wrote the Whole Foods Market cookbook, I felt that what I was doing was relatively groundbreaking, and that other companies were going to want to have food and food service programs like this. So I left the company on very good terms in 2003 or so, and I've been working for myself as an outside resource to many, many large retail companies, which we'll go through in a minute. I'm going to show you pictures of how grains are used in their operations. And so what started out as DNA, as I mentioned, for grocery stores, I also work for a number of colleges and universities, quick service restaurant chains, and some very large food service feeders like Aramark. And in addition to that, it started branching out into other food service operations, like, for example, Canyon Ranch, which does, very, very upscale spa cuisine. So the common denominator here being grains. You'll see how we use it in different operations, but I'm very, very fortunate and love what I do, which is why I still do it. So I'm going to take you through this and tell you, why grains make sense in supermarkets. But the truth of the matter is, they make sense in every operation I work in. So the reason is, grains bridge every meal period. I mean, one of the struggles that restaurants have is they may only serve dinner, they may serve lunch and dinner, but when you use grains in your operation, it's every meal part. It's breakfast, lunch, dinner, it's snacks, it's late night, so it just makes a ton of sense. Also, as you'll see in some of the pictorial slides, which I'm going to show you in a minute, very favorable food cost, extremely profitable, and frankly, it's all about making money these days. Clearly, many operations incorporate grains for many, many reasons. But, profitability is if you're not profitable in an operation, you just don't stay in existence and you can't really echo your message. So grains are readily available all year long. It's not like seasonal items, which you can only use during certain seasons. So they're always there for you. And the great thing about grains is they can be prepared in thousands of ways, which is what I love. I have so much fun with them. And as you'll see visually in some of the slides I'm going to show you, they just kind of fit into every meal period and every ethnicity. So they can also be served alone or with any protein accompaniment that you want, whether it's vegetarian or non-vegetarian based. And they're truly global in application. Traveling to different countries around the world and seeing what they do with grains, it's absolutely spectacular. And, I kind of vacillate in between feeling extremely fortunate and being amused, because what I've been focusing on for the past 25 years is all of a sudden en vogue and people really, really want to have. And so most of the work I do these days, probably 80% of it, is involving plan forward and cuisine that's more plan forward than anything else. Also, they're appropriate for all 4 seasons. When I put grain venues in retail stores, they're appropriate in every season. So I also want to say that grains can be a menu part of all venues designed for supermarkets. In a minute, when I show you these slides I install in different operations, I create what I call venues, but it's like individual food kiosk, if you will, within a supermarket. For example, I've been working the past year and a half in Oahu and Tucson, and the different concepts that I put in with grains are totally different, but equally as successful. Like, for example, a concept where you walk up and you pick your grain or you pick your base, and you pick a skewer, which is griddled a la minute or to the minute, pick a sauce, pick a topping, those kind of things. And there's all different kind of venues. I mean, there's concepts where, as Kara mentioned earlier, you build your own bowl. Well, we do that. And the thing that always amazes me is that when I'm putting these kiosks in retail supermarket chains, which may have 200, 300, 400 locations, I mean, the reason I do this, frankly, is because I get the opportunity to affect hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives on a daily basis. Because when you think about the amount of supermarkets selling, or grocerants, if you want to call them, selling food, you sell way many more in a day, and you affect people's lives each day in way larger volumes than you do when you're working for restaurants, which is what I really loved about it. Also, you can, if you don't have the skill or labor base to cook your own grains, you can get most grains now pre-cooked and packaged in a way that you don't have to take your own labor to do it, which just becomes a convenience item if that's what you need. And then another thing that's really significant for me is that if you add local seasonal ingredients using grains as a foundation, it gives you a whole other way to kind of put some really interesting menu nomenclature on your menus. For example, if I'm working in an area like I just got back from Tucson, and I'm taking local grains that are grown down the street. And by the way, Tucson was just named one of the first UNESCO World Heritage Food Cities, which is really kind of interesting. So I'm taking a local product, I'm putting local seasonal greens in it or fruits, and you can do something really spectacular from a menu language standpoint. Also, the thing about grains is that you can enhance plan-forward menu concepts, whether by using small amounts of protein, like in some places I work, they'll use like an average of a 3 to 4 ounce protein source, but by putting it on a bed of grains or incorporating it into grains, like we saw yesterday, a sorghum and beef salad, you really, really enhance a plan-forward menu if that's kind of what the operation wants. So tons of flexibility. So I'm just going to show you some, because I'm a very visual person, I'm going to show you some, concepts that I put in. And so you have to remember, keep in mind some things here when you're looking at this. And this is always kind of a tightrope that I walk. Like I've been doing this, using grains and whole foods and experimental cuisine from 1989 or so. So I always have to find a word that describes what I do without making me seem really ancient, like a grain, in fact. Because when I was first started doing this, you have to remember that this wasn't in existence. I had to get together with a couple of chefs I knew in Miami, because that's where I live, and bring in container loads of quinoa in 1989. Do you know what that was like? Nobody could pronounce it. Nobody could spell it. It was hardly available commercially. I mean, same thing with kale. I was telling some folks earlier that I used to go to the meat departments in the Whole Foods markets around 2:15 in the afternoon. And the reason I did this is because I knew that the meat guys would begin their shift at 5 in the morning, so by 2 o'clock they were out of there. And I could admit this now because I don't work for the company any longer, but I used to steal cases of kale from their walk-ins and bring them back to the kitchen on a cart, because I felt like you could actually cook with this green instead of standing it up on ice garnishing meat and seafood, because that's all it was used for, frankly. And so the reason I'm telling you that is to kind of bring all this into context, because I had, in some ways, no resources. I couldn't get grains in bulk, and so the world has really changed, thankfully, and it makes everything so much easier. So on the left, you're looking at a grains, kind of a vegetarian grains bar that I put into Google when I was working there a couple of years ago. It's not only grains, but it's like whole grain pastas and greens and fresh vegetables. But, again, this was for, people who are largely plant-forward in their diet, plant-centric. And on the right, is a bar that, I put into Whole Foods. And again, this particular one is not 100% grains. It's grains and beans, legumes, and vegetables. But, I later went to a fully established grains bar to offer people things that they had never had before. So you can kind of see what that looks like. Here on the left, you'll notice, we call this behind the glass, or the chef's case, whatever you want to call it. But you can see, the beautiful visuals of different kinds of grains and vegetarian food piled high, beautifully done, colorful, non-intimidating. It also gives the customer a way to engage an employee on the other side and talk to them about products, which, when they were well-trained, they could do that. They can explain the benefits of all this, of nutritionally dense cuisine. On the right, this is a company that I had been building in Boulder for the past couple of years, called Lucky's Markets, which are now spreading nationally. And it's kind of funny. I had this epiphany moment a few weeks ago. I forget where I was, but I realized that 80% of the companies I had spent the last 15 years building have all been acquired by either Kroger or Albertsons. And it's really funny because it's like, all these different companies with their own platforms are now part of one great entity. So you can kind of see what's going on in this country. It's kind of interesting. All the little restaurants and innovative companies that Kara was talking about earlier, they have still been able to maintain their independence and individuality, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, big companies in our country go to small companies for their innovation. They're so busy and they're so, understaffed in terms of their innovation that they have to go to small companies to innovate. And when I was with Whole Foods Market from like 1989 to 2003, they didn't even have a title for what I did. I actually created my own title and had my own business card produced that was called, I called myself a Director of Culinary Innovation, because that's what I felt like I was doing. And now it's kind of like a fairly common title in large companies, because now they have people like that. But before that, we didn't. You can see on the right, just super colorful, all different kind of dishes, many of them including grains in them. These are some scenes from, again, what we call behind the glass. These are, different dishes that, again, engage the customer and allow you to serve certain things and talk to the customer about them. What you're looking at on the left is, and notice, one of the things I'm just going to point out to you is, almost nowhere in any of these photos do you see mayonnaise or heavily coated products. I mean, my cooking philosophy, very Mediterranean in style, is to allow people to see the true, beauty of what nature has created, and combine it in a way so that it makes sense, it's appealing, it's delicious, and you don't really have to coat it or camouflage it in any way. Those purple things that you're looking at on the left are Peruvian purple potatoes that are kind of, I left them in scoops so you could pile them high. They're kind of fun like that. On the right, you'll see a number of different grain-based salads. And again, I use all different kind of grains in my cooking, although in some demographic areas that I work in, you have to kind of respect the local culture. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. For example, this latest project I've been working on over a year in Oahu, I try to serve so many different kind of grains there and distribute them to the 50 stores. But the culture in Hawaii demands calrose white rice. It's just part of the culture, just like Spam is. So that was kind of hard to change, but I will show you that I did make some headway there. So, encourage customers to build complete meals. I mean, one of the great things about using grains and plant-forward cuisine is that you can build your check average. You can have customers build meals from these different selections that they have. So, for example, if I want to create, I built the Mariano's food service platform, which you guys are probably familiar with if you're from this area. But one of the reasons I did that was because we wanted to offer a complete meal for like $6 or $9, and the way to do that was to put these appetizing foods next to each other and let a person pick A, pick B, and pick C, and you can have all that. It's a bundled meal. Essentially, it increases the check average, and it makes it convenient for the customer to take home a meal. On the right side, in Google, this is a concept called Always Vegetarian, in which a customer could build their own bowls or build their own meals, purely from vegetarian ingredients. Because it's so funny. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I mean, I go into restaurants these days, and still it surprises me to this day, although it's gotten much better, when you kind of ask questions about a vegetarian item, you'll find that it's made with chicken stock or it's got something else in it that isn't labeled. And so this particular concept on the right was done because, a lot of people in the demographic age group of, 23 to 34, they wanted vegetarian cuisine. They wanted to be able to trust it. And so that's why I built this concept. Grains, truly global in appeal. I will tell you straight off the bat that I am a total travel junkie, and this is Oldways' fault, I must say, Sarah, Cynthia. Seeing authentic cuisines around the world, I mean, I was just driven by wanting to know how they did it authentically so I could operationalize on it. And since then, of course, I've made a living, and it's my greatest joy in the world to visit countries all over the world and try to, bring back what I learned so that I can make it appealing and mainstream to the American consumer. And you can see on the left here, I was in Barcelona and I went paella. I had paella mania. And when I say that, it's because I would spend an entire day going to different paella places, which you can do in Barcelona, and just trying to determine how many different kinds there were and what it was all like and how they made them. So that's paella on the left. On the right, I frequently, when I go and come from Hawaii, I usually stop in LA because for me it's one of the one of the innovative restaurant centers in the country. And so I eat in a lot of Malaysian restaurants that offer Malaysian cuisine, Singaporean cuisine, because I just find it really, really interesting. And you look at that little cone in the middle there, which is not so little, by the way. It's about 7 or 8 inches high. But that is a yellow rice, which they make, and they serve as a hallmark of their cuisine in the middle. And that's, a Malaysian dish. It's beef rendang on the one side, and I forget what that is on the other. But it's truly an interesting dish. And look at the visuals there. I mean, for me, again, I kind of laugh because I went to school originally to art school, and then I became a medical illustrator. And I never realized I was going to, end up in this profession. But again, being a very visual person, I guess you could say I got really tired of illustrating autopsies. It's very boring work. I mean, there's not a lot of feedback, as you can well imagine. So I kind of, went into culinary after that, but keeping with my visual tone here. So global is very, very important. I mean, cultures all over the world are using grains in the most amazing ways, and have been doing that for a while. Here's a really good example. On the left, you see a number of handheld items called Musubi. And Musubi is it's culturally rich. It's been around for many, many years. And basically, Musubi is, typically it's made with calrose rice, that white, sticky, short grain rice. And what they do is, they'll usually stuff the center of it with something, whether it's a meat item, ume plums, sautéed vegetables, tuna, and then they form it in a musubi mold, typically in that shape, like a triangular shape. They wrap it beautifully, and then you hand it to a customer, and you make them all day long because they're best when they're made fresh. and they're absolutely delicious. It's one of the healthiest, most interesting handheld foods you could possibly imagine. But if you look at the one in the rear, that one is now made with a multigrain peel-off as opposed to a simple cal roast rice, which really took a lot, and it's very, very popular. It's being served in the operation that I just opened there. And again, you're kind of fighting culture a little bit, but it goes to show you when you really try and it catches on and people enjoy it, it will sustain. On the right side, I just had one of the most incredible dream trips of my life for 3 weeks in Vietnam from north to south. And I'll tell you, it's so interesting because here we are in this country, trying to do many, many things involving sustainability and gluten-free, and the entire country of Vietnam is gluten-free and sustainable because everything you have there comes from within about, I'd say, no more than 5 miles from where you're sitting. And the entire country is essentially gluten-free because everything is rice-based in some way or some form of grain. And on the right, you'll notice one of the noodle bowls that I had there, which I can't even tell you how incredible these dishes are. And the fact that you can buy that, what you're looking at, costs $2 in Vietnam. And it's absolutely delicious and made a la minute. And it's just, incredible, the flavor combinations and the simplicity of it. So, that's a rice noodle, bowl in Saigon. Here's a kind of an interesting project for me. I work in Jamaica a lot because I live in Miami, and it's like an hour-and-a-half flight. And make a really long story short, I befriended a guy who is from Chicago originally, and a very young guy who just happened to be very successful in the stock market and made a lot of money, and kind of said, I've had it with my life here in Chicago. And he moved to Jamaica and met a young Rastafarian woman who was a third-generation homeopathic healer. And they built this 5-acre eco-sustainable retreat called Zimbali Retreats, which you can go to. It's just this incredible place. And I'm so lucky. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a National Geographic special because I get to work with these guys when I go there. And these guys are called bush cooks. And bush cooks are predominantly Rastafarian, but what they do is they live in the jungle and they cook everything over a wood fire, and they're completely vegetarian, making a kind of cuisine called Aital. And Aital cuisine is vegan. They don't use honey. They don't use salt. It's purely vegetarian cooking. They use a lot of grains and soy products and local vegetables, and everything is cooked over wood. And what you're looking at on the left there is a stew that they make with textured vegetable protein and usually wheat berries, is, for the body of it. And they cook it over wood, and that's what it looks like on the right when you're out there in the jungle doing that. It's obviously there are no HACCP rules whatsoever. You would get arrested immediately if you tried to do anything in your operations, be closed down here. But there, you can do it, and that's pretty traditional. And it's one of the things I love about going there. It's very, very real. And delicious cuisine like you never had, with no salt in it even, and you're tasting it and you can't believe it's real. And their motto is, Aital is vital. And that's really true because it's a very healthy bunch. You don't see anybody overweight there, certainly. We talked before about grains can be a part of every meal period. Well, they can be. Here, for example, we have mesquite buckwheat pancakes on the left, which is super delicious. They're made with buckwheat flour with some mesquite flour mixed in, which is very smoky and delicious. And although you can't use it straight, you can mix it into your product, and it gives it this incredible flavor. That one on the left is from Canyon Ranch. And it's kind of funny because when you think about, I work for a very, very diverse group of clients. I mean, at Canyon Ranch, it's a very, very discriminating crowd. It's a very expensive place. People are there from all over the world. They're very world-traveled. And on the right is a concept from almost like a fast food operation. It's a barley and edamame salad, which I make, and on the top I put grilled skewers, chicken spanini. And so, every meal period lends itself toward grains. I don't care what meal period it is. And again, think about cost factor here, which we talked about, and I'll show you another slide in a minute. But, something that costs me, $1.80 that I can sell for $5.99, I'm making a very, very good margin on it. I'm making the customer happy and the client or the person who is, trying to stay in business happy. So it kind of works all the way around. So, we talked earlier about, whole grains traditionally, when you start to think about them, the first thing you think about are breads and bakery, and that, of course, is very true. And, these are from different bakery setups. The one on the right I set up, but the one on the left I just happened to walk into in Montreal. It was just this great, incredibly, the aroma of baked bread is always there with you. And this is a self-service operation where you can just walk over with a pair of, tongs and a bag and grab your own bread, but super visual, super simple and down to earth. And on the right is from Lucky's Market, or I think it's Lucky's Market, where, we just set up mountains of bread, and this one is service. The customer has to be serviced by an employee. But the one thing you'll notice is that, in retail markets all around the country, more and more effort is going to self-service. And, of course, there's a reason for that, because labor has become so expensive that a place can't stay in existence anymore unless you serve it yourself. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse. It's kind of like when you walk into a CVS, there's no more human beings in there. You have to go up to a machine and do everything yourself, which I really, really hate. So there's got to be a hybridization there somewhere where, you can allow people to do what they need to do and be happy about it, and also make money and stay in business. So, here's how you can set a bakery's individual signature. Everything today in all the supermarkets are about offering something in that particular place where you can't get it somewhere else, and that's how you build customer loyalty. Well, this is kind of how it is, and grains help me with that a lot. Like on the example, on the left is a pecan oat pie, which came out really, really good. And for me, at least, I'm not a baker and don't claim to be one. I'm a chef all my life. But, I had to develop certain desserts because it's just part of my job. And as much as I used to struggle with it, the availability of grains and what you can do with them in baking actually made my job a lot easier. So on the left is the pecan oatmeal pie. What I did was I tried to, kind of make a spin-off. Take something familiar that people understand, for example, a pecan pie, and then do something different with it. Add it, make it slightly right of center. Give a twist to it. So I add whole grain oats to it, and it's really, really delicious. On the right is an item that I just developed 2 weeks ago, and put it into the system 2 weeks ago. It took me several months to develop it so that it tasted good and had all the great mouthfeel that you would expect it to have. But that's a quinoa coconut caramel cake, and it's predominantly made with oats and quinoa, and it's really, really delicious. It happens to be vegan as well, and it's moist and delicious and tender. It's kind of has that amazing, I don't know how many of you like 7-layer coconut cakes. I'm a freak for that. Coconut's you either love it or you hate it. Well, I love it. And this cake is delicious and simple to make and earthy, and it's got everything going for it. So again, but this makes the place that you're working special and signature. And Chef, I think it was Chef Tony said this morning, if this was so easy, a lot more people would be doing it well. So it's not that easy, but when you do come up with something good, it's, really, really pleasant. So, grains and sandwiches. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, a great sandwich is all about the carrier. It's all about the bread. So what you're looking at is on the left, all of these sandwiches are vegan because I developed them for a very large vegan restaurant chain. And so we have whole grain buns, but also on them we have whole grain meats. Like the sandwich in the very foreground is a barbecued seitan. Seitan, I know, sounds really evil and demonic, but what it is I'm sure you all know already by now, seitan is a wheat gluten product, and it's great for a vegetarian substitute. And I love this particular sandwich. I originally developed it for Whole Foods, actually. In the middle, you're going to see this is a tofu salad, but you would swear you were eating a curried egg salad, and it's got grilled apples and fresh watercress. And, again, this is a trio of sliders that you would order on a wooden plank. And, this is just like an interesting dish for anybody. I don't care if you're vegetarian, vegan, mainstream, it doesn't matter. And to me, philosophically, that's what all of this should be about. And that's why grains are so valuable, because everybody's used to some kind of grain, whether it's rice or not. And when you put a twist on it and make it really delicious and eye-appealing, it appeals to everybody, and there's no limitations on your crowd. It's funny, we were talking earlier about trying to come up with a word that makes you seem experienced but not really ancient. And I developed the 10-speed press grains poster back in, I don't even know when it was like the early 90s. And I couldn't even find grains for that poster. Like I had where do you find amaranth and, let alone quinoa and all the other grains that we now are familiar with back in that year. So it's just pretty funny. I don't know where all these ideas came from, but I'm glad I had them. On the right is an item that I just put into the Oahu locations, and that bun is made with taro and rice. It's a Kaiser roll, and although you can't see it from this photo, there's a very popular ingredient which you're starting to see pop up all over the internet now and all over various operations called furikake, Furikake. And furikake is a Japanese spice mixture that's made with sesame seeds, small pieces of nori, and different seasonings. And there's 8 or 9 different kinds. And the reason it's amazing is because it has all this umami in it, all this delicious flavor. And you can use it, mostly it's predominantly used for sprinkling on rice or other vegetable dishes or seafood. But I used it as a topping for that Kaiser roll because I wanted to make a traditional Kaiser like I grew up with in New York, but I wanted to make it Hawaiian style. So what you see on that bun is ceviche onions, pickled red onions. That is some kind of slaw. I think it's. I think it was a mojito slaw, is what it was. It's got mint and delicious herbs in it, and that's Kalua pork on the bottom. And if you have not spent any time in Hawaii, not the liquor Kalua, but Kalua is a cooking method in Hawaii. It's where they bury the whole pig in taro leaves and tea leaves. They bury it underground and they cook it very slowly. And it's like a pulled pork. It's a Hawaiian pulled pork, and man, it is delicious. And so we talked before about the burger and its bun. Well, when you put that on a rice flour bun, although it may not be the healthiest in the world in terms of whole grains, it's just a delicious product, and it takes up the flavor of the Kalua pork and the marinated onions and the slaw. So one of my favorite sandwiches. So here we talk about adding an element of surprise, okay? Now, poke is becoming extremely popular throughout the country. I'm sure Kara's probably seen it in every place pop up, and it's amazing because I learned so much about it in Hawaii this year. But poke is like a religion in Hawaii. It's, cubes of, it's kind of like the Hawaiian ceviche version, but it literally is taken very, very serious there. So for me to be able to do this in Hawaii was kind of a stretch, but it's ending up doing extremely well. And look at the visual aspect of it. This is, again, I had to do it with Calrose rice for a number of reasons, mostly traditional and legacy. I mean, again, for me, one of the fun things but challenging things about my job is, depending on what culture I'm in, I have to appeal to the legacy of the culture. And in Hawaii, there's a lot of legacy about Calrose rice. And like I said, I can spare you all the meetings and tastings I did and everything else. But this is a poke burrito. It's a burrito where the outside shell is made out of Calrose rice, although they're starting to make one with short grain brown rice now. And it's got poke in the center of it with kimchi and some fresh vegetables. And look how beautiful it looks. On the right side, it's actually displayed in the poke station, which I think I may have another picture of. But poke, they make 25, 30 different kinds. And in the middle, I pop that poke burrito. And again, it's great handheld food. Think about it. You just pick it up and eat it. So it's working out real well. I always like to add a little element of surprise in my cooking. I don't know. It's just the way I think. Grains transform the traditional. And here's how you get people to try grains that may not be familiar with it before or are afraid of cooking them or experimenting. On the left, I have a fried chicken station where I just got finished working, but it's not just your typical fried chicken. Yes, I have that too, because look, it's like the 80-20 rule. I mean, I had to have fried chicken for regular legacy customers that want fried chicken, but this is a Korean fried chicken that I did with a rice and barley crust, and it is really, really fabulous and crispy and crunchy and delicious. And, it tastes very different. It has a different crunch to it as well because of the grains. And on the right is a Russian grain and bean stuffed pepper. My parents were both Russian, and I took my mother's meat-based recipe and made it grains-based. Spam, it is the thing in Hawaii, and that one is done with that's the furikake crust you see on. I just kind of put this in because I thought you'd like to see it. Handheld, again, on the right is Hawaiian breakfast style. Those purple leaves you see are shiso, perilla leaves, and they're tart and delicious. Talk about margins. Okay, so there you go. There's Whole Foods on the right selling cooked rice and grains for $9 a pound. Need I say any more about that? On the left, you'll notice different kinds of grains in my hot bar in Hawaii. That's roasted kabasha squash in the middle, Creole rice and beans on the right, and orange cashew basmati rice on the left. And think about the money you're making on that at $9 a pound, right? So just some inspiration now. Crispy rice rolls made with rice flour on the left. That's a romesco seared tofu with brown short grain rice on the right. These are one of my favorites. We talked a million minutes about burgers, but I just want to show you. There we are making our versions. I have my griddled oatcakes on the right, and there they are making them in mass production on the left. Seared diver scallops, ancient grain pilaf. I love this dish. It's one of my favorites. And Sarah and Cynthia, I don't know if you remember a trip to, I think it was Puglia, where we learned about burnt wheat, where they burn the crops to rotate them. I've gotten so much mileage out of this. I make my own burnt wheat pasta using spaghetti, which I roast in the oven and fold it into quinoa and other grains like spelt, kamut, millet. And there's diver scallops, orange cashew basmati rice on the right. Again, I bring up the rice in orange juice instead of water, which gives it a delicious citrus flavor. Lime cilantro rice on the left. Beautiful, fresh flavor of cilantro. You can make it with any rice or any grain for that matter. And stuffed giant kabasha squash on the right. You can't get it from the perspective of this picture, but that kabasha squash is about 2 feet across. So that can serve a family of 10 easily. Grilled oatcakes, papaya salad. This is the oatcakes you saw me making earlier. I put them over a papaya salad with fresh watercress. And on the left, those meatballs are made with wheat gluten, and I roast them, not fry them, and they're on a green curry bed of ancient grain pilaf, again, with lemongrass broccoli. So always current, even when ancient. That's what I love about grains. Ancient grain pilaf on the left with root vegetables, quinoa and greens on the right. I mean, these are ancient grains that are made in such a contemporary fashion. It makes everything so easy. Okay, last but not question. Okay, what kind of grain is this? Anybody know? Right. I couldn't resist. I just had this in Vietnam. These look like grains, though, don't they? These are sauteed silkworms with kaffir lime leaves and hot chili. I just wanted to kind of leave you with that. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. Any questions at all? Do we have time, Cynthia? Thank you.
Does anyone have a quick question for Steve?
Yes. Go right ahead.
Steve, how does shrink factor compare to conventional operations when you go to these more grain-based and so
It's actually the question was about shrink factor, which means stuff you lose. It's much easier, actually, because with grains, you can cook what you need. They're very non-perishable in their own state. Like when you cook a batch of grains and you do it right, they can hold easily for at least 5 days. When you start incorporating them with other things, that's when you kind of, other proteins and things like that, that's when you kind of lose your shelf life on them. Mm-hmm. And one more question do we have time for, Kelly?
I'm just curious about your last slide about the insects. Have you worked with this flour that they're making up that is supposed to be high in protein and insect flour? What are your thoughts on that?
I have not, because to be very transparent with you, when the time comes that I have to start eating bugs and cooking with them, I'm going back to medical illustration. Same difference,
Thank you so much. You. So we have one last presentation for today. And I thought it would be really fitting to kind of end with a talk about the future